Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 439, 440, and 441. Luffy's treatment begins, Ivan-san's miraculous power, and Believe in Miracles, Bon Clay's cries from the heart, and Luffy's back. Ivan-san begins the breakout plan. In these episodes, we have got such amazing storytelling. You guys, I loved these 3 episodes so much. I loved them. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Michael for commissioning this episode. What's up, Michael? Appreciate you. You guys, these were such fun. What a weird turn this whole story has taken. I never expected us to be here. I think in the last episode I was saying how I had to accept that most of what's being done with this queer community storyline is not in good faith, but that I feel like I can take it in good faith anyway if I just decide to purposely sort of misread some things. And I think it was Seraphim who said that it actually wasn't in bad faith, that Oda is supportive of the queer community, but just the way that they do it for the anime has to be so kind of overblown. And I felt a little bit more able to accept that in these episodes where things are I was about to say things are toned down. That is not at all true. It's not toned down, but it feels like it's sincere. Finally, it's getting past the silly shock. And it's getting into some actual emotional beats that I really, really appreciate. So I love to, you guys, that y'all know there are, as is the case with so many of these episodes, there are a few moments that the animators clearly decided, well, we're just going to animate 2 seconds of this. And then we're going to use that animation repeatedly over and over. And because we're still in this bar, there is so much repetition because these people are mostly dancing. And there is something extra surreal about the fact that every time we see them dancing, they're kind of doing the same thing. And it's not on purpose. It's not meant to be surreal, but it felt, you know what it reminded me of personally? It really reminded me of David Lynch a little bit. Or I actually don't know who was the director of Donnie Darko, but it reminded me of that kind of thing where it's almost a dream sequence, and you can just turn your head and somebody's apparently repeating the same motion over and over in a way that isn't actually the way people would normally behave. And I felt like there was a funny element here where that wasn't purposeful, but it was actually really effective. So I'm going to have to get some help here. Remind me, Florian's the only one in the chat, I think, what the name of the hiding place is again. But Iva is the name of the queen, so to speak, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, so we pick up, everybody's still dancing, Iva's still on the stage, saying hee-haw and just generally getting the crowd hyped up. And in the audience, Bon Clay is watching, and there is something about the way that Bon Clay is animated that almost makes it look like he's not happy to meet Iva. Like, it was difficult for me to decipher what his reaction really was, because it seemed like at first he was upset or just shocked in a sort of unpleasant way. But then he gradually seems to kind of get over that. And there's this funny part where Iva is pretending that he's going to faint, maybe collapse, and everybody's shouting out, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And then maybe I won't collapse. And, "Oh, you were joking?" So this is when Bon is like, "Are you the miracle worker?" And everybody in the audience is like, "You better be more respectful when you talk to Iva. He's royalty, pal. Bow down before the Queen of New Kama." And New Kama, that's what it was. Okay. Oh yeah, Florian says the hiding place is level 5.5, New Kama Land, what is also the name of the island that Sanji is on. Okay, yes, thank you. So there's a lot of time spent just establishing. I love the fact that Iva is calling everybody his little candies. And there's just like such a great name. I just really, really like it. And he says like, "Anybody can call me whatever they want. I don't sweat the small stuff. They could even call me Dookie." But then he just screams, "Never call me Dookie." And somebody in the audience, "Then why did you say it?" "Oh, he got me again." This is such a weird bit. So Iva keeps repeating, "Never call me Dookie," until somebody comes stalking through the door. And this is really funny to me because, like, I just want to really point out, I want to step back for a second and point out the fact that we've got this, like, prison that has supposedly got such renowned security. And there's this entire subspace that they have created, that they are living in, that isn't on the radar. Everybody has been like, "I guess demons are stealing people," and we're all just gonna let that be the story that circulates, even though our security is legendary. We don't talk about this part. But then also, this whole performance gets interrupted by this dude busting in, and he is like a caricature. He almost reminds me of the animation from Spider-Verse of what's his name, Mr. Fisk, where he's got the really, really huge shoulders and thick neck, and his head almost seems to just float in the middle of this, like, just plane of shoulders. But he busts in and he's got like a bazooka, and I'm just going, where in the hell are you even getting this weapon from? And how did you get out and find this place? Like, the security here is a joke, frankly. And he's really angry. He says, 15 years ago, my father, who was the king of my homeland, like, visited your country, and then he came home and came back to us as a queen. And there's a bunch of people, like, sort of shocked or giggling to each other. Do you have any idea how ashamed I was? His family and his country were ruined, and I fell from my princely status to nothing but a lowly pirate. But all the days I spent suffering, living in this hell, are well worth it if I get one shot at the monster who destroyed my life. And Iva's up here, sweating bullets, knees literally knocking together, going, no, please, don't do it. Where did you even get that thing? Don't point that at me. You have mercy. I'm fragile. If you shoot me with that, I'll die. You'll kill me. You can't kill me. And at the beginning of this, he had seemed so sincerely afraid. But then as he reaches the end of that, you can't kill me, he's like kneeling and fist pumping like he's just won a victory, or, you know, it's a weird like transition. And the guy with the gun just gets really, really angry and looses a cannonball at Iva, who then says, "Nuh-uh, death wink," and just winks in the direction of this cannonball, which releases a pink cloud of gas, which catches the ball and sends it directly back at the guy who shot at Iva and takes him out. So he goes careening over, and Iva is being cheered on by the crowd. Of course, all of this is being observed by Bon Clay in this particular way, where he's like, there was almost an impression of like the way that Iva was behaving at first was giving the impression that Iva wasn't going to be able to take care of himself, that he was really genuinely like helpless here and begging for mercy in a way that's like sort of pitiful. And all of a sudden is able to whip out this weapon with this wink, just a wink that is so impressive. And then all of a sudden, Iva like takes this huge leap, lands right in front of this guy, and yells, "Emporio female hormone." And these claws come up out of the gloves that he's wearing, these like magenta gloves, and he swipes at this guy and nails him like right in the pectoral with these claws. And the guy says, "What was that?" And then all of a sudden his body begins to transform until he looks like a woman instead. And Iva is saying, "Your father wanted to become a woman. Tell me, what's wrong with that?" And the prisoner is continuing to transform. "Two mothers and one son, two fathers and one daughter. What's wrong with that? You're all family." And finally, the prisoner's transformation is complete. And it's a blonde woman. And because the guy wasn't wearing pants, now there's, or wasn't wearing a shirt, this is a topless woman in pants that are way, way, way too big. So he's like clinging the pants up around himself and just going, "Oh God, this is so humiliating." And Bon Clay, of course, is just like, "Wait, what? How did this just happen? Are you kidding me?" Everybody else begins applauding. And Iva is just standing watching and going, oh my God, the face. The spotlight comes on and he gets a mic and says, "You could become a woman or become a man. Hee-haw. Or maybe you could be both. You should be able to decide for yourself. Right?" And everybody's out here dancing, cheering on, continuing as Bon Clay watches, mouth agape. "That which you call gender is a label. It's nothing but a border. I have no need for it. No, everyone here is beyond it. We've all crossed over that silly border, which means you're looking at the new human race. New comma. This is the Garden of Freedom. New comma land. Hee-haw." And camera backs up. We see the entire crowd going absolutely wild for this. And of course, these dudes continuing to dance in this weird way that they dance. And eventually, the attacker gathers himself up and is just like, "Oh my God," and just runs away. Now, this is something that is so rife with, like, I don't even know what to think here, because the weirdness of deciding that we are going to, like, the weapon is going to be transforming people into a different gender. It's so fascinating, like, the implications of this. And it's honestly kind of a fucked up thing to do when you think about it. Like, the point of what Iva is saying, which is that gender is a construct, obviously I agree with, and that it's up to you whatever gender you actually are. But basically what Iva is doing is, like, taking away the identity that this guy actually aligns with and forcing him into a body that doesn't fit. And at the same time, what Iva could have done is simply kill him, because this guy came in to kill Iva for something that is not his fault, even though Iva's being blamed for it. His dad became a woman, and now he wants somebody to blame for it. So I'm not trying to say that he doesn't deserve something fucked up happening to him. But I do think it's interesting that what Iva has done is sort of inflict upon this guy the experience of living in a body that you know isn't correct. Like, you don't actually identify with your own body and you feel like you are in the wrong one. And that is how your father had felt at one time. And now you get it. But it was done to you magically, so it feels more literally true, but is not actually any more valid than anybody else's experience who feels like their body does not correlate, you know? So it's just a really interesting, like, the implications of this are fascinating. And also the overall thing with Iva is that he administers hormones. Like, that's a lot of his attacks are hormone based. And I really like this in a way that's, like, not ironic at all, because what I think a lot of us fail to think about in terms of our existence and identities as people and the way that we feel about certain other people or ourselves or situations is so highly, highly dependent on hormones, even though we don't want to believe that, which I completely understand. Like, why would you want to believe that? It's not fun to realize how completely at the mercy your health, your, like, mental state is on something that is completely outside of your control. And this is something that anybody who has got mental illness is all too familiar with. Like, as somebody who suffers from pretty intense depression and also ADHD, my body just doesn't make the hormones and chemicals that it should. And I just get to sit here and be fucking suicidal because it's just not enough serotonin. Really? And that's for real? Like, and other people they just get that serotonin. They just get it. Their bodies just make it, and it's just like, fine? How unfair is that? And if I had just a body that functions slightly more effectively, I wouldn't feel as miserable as I feel a lot of the time. And that's pure luck. Like, you don't choose the body that you get born into unless you believe you do, but there's no evidence for that. So ultimately, so much of the way that, like, we can move through the world and the ways in which we function and what we're able to, like, the kinds of things that we are able to be successful at are going to be so much more limited because our possibilities have been closed off to a degree by what our bodies will allow. And so the concept of actually somebody who can just affect your hormone levels is really, really interesting, especially, like, in terms of mood and things like that. I mean, I am just really, there's so much to this that I want more answers to. And it reminds me a little bit of like when Miles and I were covering Twilight. We were talking about the ways that Jasper's potential power could work, because it's such a strange thing where he can affect mood, but is that actually physically changing the like level of chemicals in the body? And I believe that eventually Miles and I came to the conclusion that it was, because Bella is affected by Jasper's powers when she is not affected by a lot of other powers. And there are some that she is, but many she's not. And it seemed like what Stephanie Meyer eventually said was that any powers that were like mind related, like illusion sort of powers that would cause like Bella's mind to be violated or under attack, that is the kind of thing that she was impervious to. But when it came to like a physical thing, it affected her just the same as anybody else. So that was like what the solution sort of wound up seeming to be, was that Jasper was affecting chemical levels in people's bodies to relax them or make them more tense and angry or whatever in response to any given situation. Let's see. Florian says, this is not confirmed, but I think Iva's powers wear off after a time. It is just hormones that the body can metabolize, just headcanon though. Interesting. Well, who knows? I get what you mean though. Like if it's a hormone injection that has made this guy look like a woman, then, if anybody is on like HRT because they are transitioning, you've got to keep that up. And if you don't, you start to suffer some really intense like symptoms of withdrawals and changes back to the body that you were originally born into. And it can be really traumatic, like, because again, a lot of it affects mood, and it also causes like the dysmorphia that you originally were suffering from. So, that makes sense that it would be like a temporary thing, because hormone changes are temporary. That's like the nature of them. So anyway, I just think this is so interesting. It's so weird. Like, what a wild power. And I just, again, want to reiterate that I really am enjoying the Rocky horrorness of this look. It's just really funny. So this is when Bon Clay comes up. And Iva insists on calling him Bon Boy. But Bon Clay is like, I never stopped believing that you were alive. I'm so glad I found you, but I have to ask you a favor. I want you to save my friend who was poisoned by Magellan. Please, can you save his life? No antidote can help him. He's lying there dying, and there's nothing that I can do. And Iva is like, oh, if you're talking about the Straw Hat Boy, I've already started to give him treatment. That's already happening. Actually, the reason that we took care of you was because he begged us to. And we get a flashback of him like yelling out. And it turns out that what Luffy said, he was told that it was going to cost him 10 years of his life for Iva to help him. And the way it was presented at first made it sound like Iva is some, like, it reminded me of like a deal with the Fae where you give up 10 years of your life in exchange for a favor. But what it seems like later on, based on the way I was talking about it, is he, by accepting what Iva can do to potentially save Luffy, it's going to cause Luffy to lose 10 years of his life. It's not like Iva is simply out here collecting years of people's lives like the devil or like a Fae queen. It's like, look, I can do this and help you, but you should know that if you are saved, it's going to have a repercussion on the other end. That's what it sounded like to me anyway. But yeah, Luffy agrees to it. So we jump out from here at this point for a little bit. This cracked me up to Buggy and Mr. 3, who are fleeing from the wolves on these wax stilts that they're running on. And because they're on stilts, they can take bigger strides, and these wolves are still like almost keeping up with them. And Buggy is like, we have got to get a move on or we are never going to lose these things because they are almost catching up. And they're like not even sure where they're really heading. They don't know where the exit is. And if finally they reach the crest of a hill and it looks like their stilts just break and they go down. But we go back then to the tunnels where Mr. 2 is hearing Luffy screaming. And he is so upset by this, guys, which you would be. Like, hearing people and animals suffer. It's like the whole thing for me is pain is so cruel and so it's a necessary thing. We need to have pain to signal to us when we are hurt, when we need to take it easy. It's like there's a use to pain. There's a point to it. But it is so difficult for me to understand how some people like enjoy inflicting pain because I feel sick to my stomach when I begin to hurt somebody. And I have had to do things to care for my dogs that hurt them because they were, with Sam especially, he had this like terrible infection because he just got his cone off in the middle of the night while I was asleep and got at his stitches and yanked him out. And he got a really bad infection that I wound up having to bring him into the bathtub every day and hose this debrided wound out. And eventually he healed, but it was definitely like the kind of thing that if we hadn't caught what was happening, he could have died. And I had to do it. And the screaming yelps this dog would let out when I was doing it, I came so close to vomiting a couple times because it was so upsetting. So this whole thing here with like Mr. 2, who is out here in the hall, so to speak, and hearing Luffy just screaming. And Iva is like, he's been screaming like this since we started the treatment, and it's going to keep going for like another 2 days. And when he says 2 days, I'm just going, oh my God, that's like way too long. He's not going to be able to make it to his brother in time. But it turns out he's a different type. He built different. So he says, I wish you a pleasant journey to the Valley of Death, that is, in the flashback. And then jams his pointy fucking fingers in Luffy's sides as he administers some, like, healing hormone. I don't even know what this looks like. But yeah, so this is what starts things off because it's causing Luffy to, like, have to detox, essentially, is what's going on. So poor Mr. 2, he's out in the hall and he's like, he's been wailing like this for 10 hours. And he's like fallen to his knees. He is so upset. And yeah, Iva is just like, yeah, the spirit and hormones combined, I've drawn out his latent immunity and his body will start changing. Only time will tell whether he or that poison is stronger. But it's raging at extraordinary speeds. He will survive only if he can withstand that pain and escaping from death. Let's see, I'm sorry. Because it's moved too fast. He will survive only if he can withstand all that pain, and escaping from death does not come cheap. And it's an interesting thing because, again, I misread it at first. So it seemed like what he was saying was like he had to pay a high price. But I really think I misread that at first, and that's not exactly what he means. He's paying a price, but it's not like to Iva specifically. It is in general because of what it is that he has decided he wants. And later on, Iva is talking about, because like Mr. 2 is saying, how can you leave him like this? And basically, Iva's response is, look, he decided what he wanted to do. And I don't actually play much of a part anymore. I administered what I do. And now it's up to him how bad he wants it. And the way that miracles work isn't just, I can inject him with something and it just happens. That's not it. The way it works is that somebody has to have the force of will to make it be. That's what the miracle really like comes from, is from their need and willpower. And this is the sort of thing that I'm not too proud to admit. I think I wouldn't be great with you guys. Like, there's a podcast that I listen to called Complete Guide to Everything, which is really fun. And there was a discussion once about, like, you know, the zombie apocalypse or whatever apocalypse you may have. And the ways in which you can survive and the variety of people out there and how they prep for it. Some people building bunkers, collecting supplies, weapons, whatever. And one of the hosts was basically like, I don't want to survive. If the world collapses and I have to like fight everybody in order to stay alive, just kill me. It's fine. I don't want to stay alive badly enough to do the kinds of things I'd have to do to stay alive, or to live through those things and then carry that with me every day. I'm good. I'll just die, and that's fine. It's really not a big deal. And I felt that so deeply in my heart. Like, I mean, just let's get real right now, everybody. A lot of us have what's relatively, like, in a very relative sense, an easy life. We're not fighting for survival in a literal way. But we deal with enough problems and difficulties that sometimes being alive doesn't really feel worth it as it is. And you add on the need to like commit violence or endure violence or observe violence and have to carry that memory with you, and like the levels that could reach in order to stay alive in a world that has otherwise kind of fallen apart. And I just feel like I'm barely interested in staying alive right now. That doesn't sound like something that would interest me at all. Count me out. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm good. So the way that I was framing this of just like, you have to really want to stay alive. A big part of me kind of was like, oh, yeah, I mean, it makes sense because a lot of us just wouldn't fight this hard. We would just be like, hey, I did my best. Win some, lose some. And then we would lose one. And that would be it. But Luffy is just built of different stuff. I'm sorry, Florian is in the chat. I think what Iva did is speed up the process how cells are built and broken down. You know how we say after 7 years you're made out of completely new cells? That happens to Luffy within hours to fight the poison. I see. That's an interesting... Okay, I like that theory. It is funny, though. Can we just talk about the fact that we're all new cells after 7 years? How come we don't look new every 7 years then? How come we're all fresh and new cells, but we're still aging? That seems really unfair. I don't like that. So anyway, this results in the next episode, which is Bon Clay outside of Luffy's door, simply like cheering him on. And I would have thought that this would be more annoying than it was, but I actually wound up feeling very touched by it, because the whole point of this is that Bon Clay decides if he's going to have to experience this horrible pain and go through all of this, the least I can do is prove to him that he's not alone. And you guys, this got me. Like, it just really did. I love this concept, and especially because I love Mr. 2 so much. I know I've said it so many times, but I really, really mean it. The joy I have gotten from the story taking the turn it has with him it's probably like my favorite development of the whole series. I almost thought that Luffy wasn't going to recover, and that what was going to happen was that Bon Clay was going to have to go ahead and try and save Ace on his own, and that like maybe Luffy would begin to recover toward the end of that ordeal and he would finally be able to step in. But that the main thing we were going to see was Bon Clay having to step up to the plate in Luffy's place. And I would have believed he would do that, because he is just so devoted and sweet-natured. And I just love that he has been given the chance to, like, be more than a villain. This is so much more interesting. And he had seemed to have so many very delightful, likable qualities to me. And I really wasn't sure if that was going to be explored at all. There are so many times, not just with this series, but with so many others, where a character gets introduced that you find like really fascinating. And then they just sort of are very much like a side character, or even they get killed off pretty quickly. And you're just like, oh, that's too bad. And so I didn't have any expectations at all about what was going to happen with him. And seeing that he was popping up in this arc, I was delighted, of course, but I never expected it to go where it has gone. And it's just completely exceeding all my expectations. The only thing now that could really bring it to the next level for me, where I'm feeling truly satisfied, is if Bon Clay became a member of the crew, which I don't think is going to happen, but I desperately wish would happen. I would love that. It would, like, it just, he belongs, you know, he just does. And I don't know, I could really see there being like a camaraderie with pretty much everybody, because he's such an encouraging type. You know, once he knows that he's got your friendship, he's going to be a cheerleader for you and always like be building you up. And I just don't see that there's anybody that he wouldn't get along with, except maybe Zoro, because he's just kind of a stick in the mud a lot of the time with he's just a pain in the ass. So anyway, oh my God. And I forgot, because, the hormone fruit is the one that I've had. It gave me this fabulous power to alter the hormones of anyone I see. I can change their sex, body temperature, skin color, growth, even their emotions. I can remodel people from the inside out like an engineer of the human body. The candy boys and candy girls you see here used my help to really kick gender in its sorry pants. Is that the best line? Kick gender in its sorry pants. That is so hilarious. And as somebody who has frequently, especially at the heights of my body issues, fantasized about finding a genie with 3 wishes and choosing an exact body that I wanted, this would be delightful. I would definitely I'm not interested in changing gender, but I wouldn't mind some tweaks. Sure wouldn't. Anyway, but all those hang-ups are a thing of the past. Those aren't the kind of miracles we deal in here. I just provide the hormones. Everyone else provides the dream. So yeah, Bon Clay, I was sort of wondering whether he was going to want a change himself, but it doesn't seem like Bon Clay is interested in becoming a woman. It seems like Bon Clay just wants to be able to, like, you know, dress and be how he wants to be. So I think he seems pretty content in that respect. And I was explaining how all of the people here were once prisoners that made their way here by sheer luck. Every level of Impel Down has an entrance to this area, which that is really, really important information, because the fact that there's an entrance on every level means that they can get out onto every level. So they have a whole network now that they could be traveling through that isn't anywhere on the actual maps. And he says there's even one in the mortuary, which I'm going to call right now maybe a way for them to sneak out. If you're in the mortuary, I don't know if you like burn the bodies there or what, but like if you're being sent somewhere to be buried, you could maybe sneak out inside a coffin or something. I don't know. But yeah, he says that we can get everything we need in this prison. A paradise hiding in the bowels of hell itself. The jailers would never believe such an absurdity exists. And we are still able to keep tabs on what's going on outside because we have a transponder snail. So we're able to like watch what the security guards are watching and keep up with other parts of the world. And I love the way this is like animated here. It's sort of like the transponder snail is just showing them like a movie. Like everybody's in what seems to be a huge theater and eating popcorn and watching what's transpiring on the screen. And he says it's not every day that we get to see a break in and break out. So we've been really following what you've been doing with great interest. But this place wasn't always here. Some prisoner had a devil fruit power that was good for digging through stone, and they were the first to start chipping away at these caverns. That led other prisoners here a long time ago, and bit by bit, new recruits started building this place together. This paradise of ours is actually a bit like an ant farm made through digging tunnels through the rock, and we are located between levels 5 and level 6. And we get to see like just how big it is. It's quite an expansive area. And when he says level 6, Bon Clay says 6. Wait, I thought there were only 5. And I thought we had heard about level 6 already, but maybe I'm mistaken. But yeah, Iva says it's not widely known, but that is where the true villains are kept locked away. They are all condemned to a lifetime sentence without parole. It is known as the Eternal Hell. Exceedingly wicked crimes, often covered up by the world government, and incidents that could damage the reputation of the powers that be. If you had tried to pull the same maneuver a little while back, it wouldn't have been so easy. And this was really interesting. There was another beastly baddie guarding this prison not too long ago, you see. He was the jail manager of Impel Down, Shiryu of the Rain. And to size him up, he was just as strong as Warden Magellan. Honestly, considering most of the time that Magellan spends sitting on the crapper, you might have said Shiryu was even more fearsome. And we find out that Shiryu was like a fucking sadist maniac. To the point where Magellan had to step in a couple times and be like, dude, what are you doing? oh my God, we have a reputation. You can't be pulling this kind of shit. If the atrocities that he calls them atrocities, that you're committing get out, our entire reputation is going to be fucking ruined. And the way that this conversation goes, I am not sure how exactly Magellan like takes him out. He says, I remind you, we're jailers, not butchers. No one cares about the lives of these vermin. And Magellan says, I won't tolerate this any longer. Impel down would be disgraced beyond measure. I must exercise my authority as warden and place you under arrest. And we just hear like the cell closing, and we see that this guy was behind bars, but I don't know why he didn't put up more of a fight, like, or, you know, if he's still alive. I have to assume he still is. Iva is saying he killed prisoners when and as he saw fit. Even on the slightest whim, he was completely out of control. So now they hold him in the darkest levels of 6 as a high security risk. Now, is this supposed to be somebody that we saw when the camera was like down, so to speak, in Ace's level? Because his face does not look familiar. But we've also had a lot of like shots of the people in the surrounding cells to Ace that are all shadow with just like eyes, and you don't really get any features. So I suppose it's possible that we kind of saw him, but we didn't actually get a look at his features. But yeah, and then Iva goes on. He's in fine company. Catalina Davon, the world's most dangerous woman, is down there, which is perfect timing because this was a point when I started to be like, where are the women kept? Because clearly in this area, Nukama, there are women, but they could have just been transformed from men. So I wasn't really sure if the prison held women at all. We haven't seen any women prisoners, so apparently there are. San Juan Wolf, the great battleship, even heavy drinker Vasco Shot, names to make anyone tremble with fear. And I'm like, or not, because we never heard of these people in our lives. I don't know what to tell you. Half the crimes these villains committed were so heinous that even the newspapers dared not to mention them. Your former boss is there too. I suppose he was pretty wild in his own way. And that is Crocodile. And we get a little bit of like a... This is so funny, you guys. A little like sort of... I don't know what to call this. The animation is just like a confrontation between all of these characters facing down with each other. And one, like, we've got everybody here facing off with all of the Baroque Works people, but Usopp's got a really goofy expression on his face, and like Nami is sticking her tongue out. Everyone else is mean mugging except for those two, which I did find really, really funny. And yeah, here it is. This is when Bon Clay says, it just goes to show you the power of friendship. And he begins to do his little like pirouette spin. So there's a sort of a, I'm trying to like jump ahead here because I only have a few minutes left. Here it is. Oh yeah. So he knows that Luffy is Ace's brother. He's aware of that. But later on, when he mentions the dragon, who is one of his close friends, it turns out, because he is unsurprisingly a revolutionary, he had no idea that Luffy was related to Dragon. And it's interesting because Luffy says, like, I don't think it's a big deal. I think I can tell you my grandfather didn't keep it a secret. But he did keep it a secret because he doesn't tell Luffy until, like, Luffy's 16 or whatever. So, I don't know if he should be just, like, saying that shit, but it's probably fine. Too bad his plan is dead in the water now. He's talking about Luffy because Luffy is still not woken up. But we can jump ahead and get to the point where Bon Clay is just outside his doors yelling for Luffy to, like, keep going. You can do it. You can just keep hanging on. And everybody is sort of like, he's like wearing himself out. He needs to take a rest. And Bon Clay is... Eventually, Iva steps in because people are kind of wanting to pull Bon Clay away from the door. And Iva's like, no, he wants to prove to his friend that he isn't alone. And it's not going to do him any harm, and it very well maybe could help. So let him go ahead with it. So meanwhile, with the other, like, security guys, they are reporting to Magellan that Luffy has disappeared. We have the discovery of Hannibal and him, like, tied to the ceiling without any of his clothing or anything. It's an interesting, like, I had thought that Mr. 2 was able to transform himself into wearing actual clothing, but I guess he isn't. Like, I thought that there had been a couple moments where he was able to do that, or maybe it's just not really that consistent. I don't know. But yeah, so everybody else gathers around with Bon Clay and helps cheer Luffy on and is I love how absolutely everybody here is wearing thigh-high fishnets with, what do you call it? Garter belts. But we go back down to Ace. And the dude that he's with is like, well, maybe this woman was just pulling your leg. And Ace is like, are you saying that she, like, made her way all the way down here to talk to me just to lie to me? And I was like, that's really, like, yeah, what do you even mean? And eventually he comes down and is just like, look, I know you mean well, but my brother absolutely would do this shit and bust in here. He just would. And then we cut back to Luffy, who is breaking his way out of the cell that he has been kind of, like, locked into. And he looks like hell. He is skin and bones, and the whole, like, there's a corpse-like quality to him. And he just yells out, meat. And when we go to the next episode, they are feeding him like crazy, and he is taking several times his body size in steak at a time and just fucking hosing it down. And eventually there's this weird sequence where he, like, pushes the nutrients of the food that is in his, like, he's swollen in the center with real skinny arms and legs, but then he, like, pushes that into his arms and legs in a very literal sense and manages to become healthy looking again, but he isn't actually back to normal. And they keep trying to tell him, you're going to have to take more time to heal. And he's like, I just don't have it. But when he tries to get up and walk, it's obviously an effort for him. Meanwhile, Bon Clay has collapsed himself. And Iva explains he basically sacrificed his own health in order to be able to cheer you on. And your recovery was so miraculous that I have to assume what he was doing did help. And again, Luffy is just so touched. And he's like, look, when he heads out later, he says, I hate to ask you to do this, but can you keep an eye on him while I go do what I need to do? And I love how much Luffy respects Bon Clay and how, like, just, this is some real shit, you know? And he pulls out the Viva card. It's a tiny scrap at this point. I assume now you want to go and rescue your brother, regardless of what advice we might give you. It's your life after all, and you can do whatever you want with it. And Luffy says, are you going to make an escape too? Because the point of coming down here was that Bone was going to try and rescue you. And Iva is just like, oh, really? Well, that's really nice. That's charming. But no, it's a sweet gesture, but I don't need to be saved. I'm cool down here. It's not my time to break out. Not quite yet. I know what's going on in the world right now. There's been a shift in tide and big changes are coming. The Navy and the Whitebeard pirates are taking center stage. Even so, the big man's still waiting things out. I'm, of course, referring to my comrade, the leader of all revolutionaries in the world. And this is when he mentions, you may know him as Dragon. And Luffy says, oh yeah, my dad. And I was thinking there was going to be reaction. But instead, Iva just keeps going, yes, that's the plan. When your dad makes a move with that army of his, and then I shall make a maneuver of my own. And all of a sudden, it registers. And he just yells like, wait a second. Did you say your dad? And Lou's like, yeah. And he then puts it together. Wait, if Ace is your brother, then that's his dad too. Oh my God. I had no idea about any of this. And I love when he just goes flying into the wall and then collapses. Dragon doesn't have any children. That's crazy talk. And Luffy's like, maybe I shouldn't have said anything. No, I think it's probably fine. But yeah, when he says, where did you come from? Luffy says the East Blue, and we get a flashback of Iva talking to Dragon and being like, every time we go and take breath of air, you seem to face in the same general direction. What's the deal with that? And it's clear like he's looking toward home. So he tells Luffy not to let anybody know Dragon is his father. And Luffy, yeah, I just figured that out. I'm his dear friend and one of his trusted commanders, and that means I'm a revolutionary. That's the reason I was arrested. So it's my duty to help you whether you like it or not. I can't just stand around and let my friend's son die before my eyes. Listen up. Tell everybody in the new Kama land we're going to move fast and rescue Ace Boy before his execution, and then we'll break out of Impel Down. Guys, I am so here for this. I am so here for the queer army getting together behind Luffy and fighting like hell, wearing fishnet thigh highs to help him save his brother and then join the revolution against the government. Are you kidding me? Like, what is this? Is this like, this? Am I being punked? Like, this is so great. Oh my God. It's so wonderful. I am so here for it. Really, really quick because I'm out of time here. But we touch base briefly with Mr. 3 and Buggy, who they have managed to make it back to level 4, I think. But they run into a transponder snail and they're having to like sort of work their way around it without being spotted by it. But there's still poison in the air because of fucking Magellan. So they're each trying desperately not to like sneeze and their eyes are turning red. It's like a whole thing. Meanwhile, Hannibal, like they're, you know, discovering exactly how far things have gone with him being impersonated, and the transponder snail winds up dying because of the poison. So these two managed to find a way past it, but it's a bad scene. Magellan, meanwhile, having some tummy trubs, and he is like going in for this ceremony where they collect Ace, and it's supposed to be a really big deal for their reputation that they are on time. So he has to be gotten out of his latrine, even though he isn't quite ready to go. And Iva pumps Luffy up with some adrenaline in order to give him the strength he needs. He's like, it's going to catch up with you in a few days. So be forewarned, but hopefully by then it won't matter anymore and you'll be able to rest. And, I love fighting the wolves and everything. Like, and Inazuma is the one that's like got the parti-colored hair and the wine glass. And they open up the doorways and it's just like, well, who's going to come at us? And Iva just says, well, who cares? Just let them come. And all of the security guys like lock in and realize, oh my God, that's Iva who has been missing for years. And there's the Straw Hat Kid that we thought got eaten by wolves. And it ends with Luffy yelling, hold on, Ace, I'm coming for you. And the moment where they go to gather Ace and put him in cuffs and bring him out. Bring him out, bring him out. So that is the end of the episode. But this is a really fun one, you guys. Really, really enjoying this. All right, I have got to go. I'm over time, but thank you again so much for hanging out with me. Thank you, Florian. Thank you, Michael, for commissioning this. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.